May 1998, I was sailing on board Queen Elizabeth II when, out of the blue, an announcement was made that Carnival Corporation was going to acquire Cunard and that there was the prospect of another great transatlantic liner to be built. And a few days into that crossing, Mickey Arison, chairman of Carnival Corporation, called me to ask when I would get back to Southampton because he wanted me to start work on this new project. One of the biggest challenges for me as the designer of the new ship was to convince everybody that if we were to continue with the transatlantic run, we needed a real liner and not just a cruise ship. I set out what the difference between a liner and a cruise ship was, starting with the structure of the ship, where the hull is much thicker, the form, especially forward, so that the ship could go through the Atlantic storms without the prospect of being damaged. And the power of the machinery is another important consideration, the general stability. And when you combine all these things together, it actually equates to a 40% increase in cost, because there's the loss of revenue from having such a fine form and not being able to add as many cabins as if it was a cruise ship form. And then you've got the extra cost of the steel weight and everything else. So the big challenge with Project Queen Mary was to design a ship that would offset that 40% extra in cost. The design of Queen Mary II really started by looking at the layout of the Queen Elizabeth II, because I thought, well, this ship's been sailing across the seas now for nearly 40 years. Obviously, she's done something right in all that time. So I laid the plans out and went round the ship, ticking off the various areas that I thought would work on the new ship. I drew a line on a piece of paper, and the line represented 345 metres in length. And that was the longest length of ship that I could accommodate in Southampton in the turning basin and at the New York piers. And the other main constraint that I had to work with was getting under the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. And there I had a height from the waterline to the very top of the ship of only 62 metres. And that's why Queen Mary II in the event has a rather squat funnel, because even with the funnel we have on this ship, she only has a minimum of 9 feet to get under that bridge. And many people have said to me, what would have happened if I'd got the calculation wrong? And my answer purely was, it would only be a problem the first time. As the design evolved, there were several areas that I knew would stand out as the iconic wow features of the ship. One of them is the tremendous Britannia restaurant, and the space there I envisaged would be very much akin to the original first-class restaurant on the Queen Mary that's now at Long Beach, California. That was the sort of space I had in mind in order to hand it over to the interior designers. But the other great iconic parts of the ship, if you look at the external, for instance, you've got the forward face of the superstructure, which is my interpretation of the old Queen Mary. It was actually modelled on a sandcastle when I was a young boy building sandcastles on Bournemouth Beach. Once the sea would come in, the sandcastle would collapse and make a sort of conical shape. And I remembered that, and I thought, well, that would be good to use for the forward face of the superstructure. And then we've got the big breakwater taken from the Normandy, and the wheelhouse itself, the bridge wings enclosed, so that all the electronic equipment that we now have is kept dry and doesn't be affected by the weather. Just after a year after signing the contract, we were ready to actually start cutting steel. And from that, panels were built up. The panels were then built into sections, and then the sections assembled into 98 blocks weighing up to 600 tons each. And these blocks were systematically lowered into the big dry dock where the ship was constructed, welded together. And that ceremony where the first 2 blocks were brought together was the 4th of July on 2002. Coincidentally, the anniversary of Cunard's first sailing with Britannia in 1840. And from those 2 blocks, the other blocks were systematically added, and then by March of 2003, The ship was structurally complete, 50,000 tonnes of steel in the dock, and she was floated and moved around to the outfitting quay. From the end of March 2003, when the ship floated out, up until the end of September, a lot of outfitting was undertaken. All the passenger cabins that were modularised, built ashore, brought onto the ship by crane, wheeled into position by forklift truck, and then welded into place. So all those cabins were added, the public rooms started to be outfitted, all the air conditioning, ducting, all the piping, all the myriad of things that make a great liner were put in place during that period. And then in the end of September, we actually set off on the first sea trial, which was merely to test all the systems and to make sure there wasn't anything horrendously wrong. We attempted a speed run and we achieved a speed of just over 29 knots. Not quite what we needed to do for the contract, but we still knew we had to clean the hull and do another sea trial. So that process was completed by the end of September. The ship went back into dry dock, was cleaned, the bottom was repainted, and then we went out again early in November for the owner's trial. And during that period, we tested absolutely everything. One of the most important trials was the speed run, and there we achieved 29.62 knots, nearly 0.3 of a knot faster than was required by contract, and everybody was absolutely overjoyed. Immediately before Christmas in 2003, the ship left Saint-Nazaire. As the ship departed the shipyard, the whole of the town stopped work and came out to see us leave. Traffic on the Loire Bridge near Saint-Nazaire came to a standstill, and we gradually eased out. And we didn't go to Southampton immediately. There was a stop off at Vigo in Spain for Commodore Juan Warwick to try some manoeuvring to begin to handle the ship and know what the characteristics were. And from there we set off, arrived at Southampton on a thoroughly miserable Boxing Day, Christmas 2003, berthed, and then there was a huge entourage of travel agents, visitors and the like, right up to sailing day on the 12th of January 2004. But the most important guest of all, of course, was Her Majesty the Queen and His Royal Highness Prince Philip, and they came down to Southampton on the 10th of January to name the ship and see us on our way. 10 years has passed since Queen Mary II entered service, and it's been wonderful during that time to see the travelling public gradually share the affection that they had with the QE2 and transfer that over now to Queen Mary II. And more passengers that I get to meet say that they wouldn't want to go on anything else again. And it's great seeing the way the various programs have developed, like RADA that come on board to do the acting classes, and all the other things that you can now do on this great ship. And I must admit, looking around and seeing everything, there's not so much that I think needs to be changed. The thing that gives me the most pride of all is people being seen to enjoy themselves, and it's the pleasure that people have by experiencing the ship and what she has to offer is the greatest sense of pride that I get. And I am immensely proud of the ship, but not just for myself, for all the people that work with me. Everybody worked extremely hard to make this ship the world's greatest passenger ship, and that is in the whole fabric of the ship. Everything you see is quality, and I personally think that you would be hard-pressed to build a better ship than this. Many times when I'm on these crossings, I grab a few moments of personal time to just contemplate and reflect what we did 10 years ago when we delivered the ship and the work that was put into the project. And for me, the most wonderful place to sit is in the corner of the Commodore Club on either one of the wings of the room, where you have the view out to the front, to the side and to the stern. And I think that's the most wonderful place to contemplate life and what the future holds.